Hey, good afternoon to you. Mark Sutt with HurricaneTrack.com here. Hurricane Outlook and discussion time. This is going to be the first of two of these video updates today. Why? Because the tropics are becoming very active. We have a couple of systems that we need to watch. Actually, three, including the Eastern Pacific. So I'm going to have one now where we're going to look at a few of the current conditions, kind of set the stage. Then we're going to look at the GFS. There's a lot of computer models out there. I am going to focus almost entirely this season on mainly two models, the GFS and the Euro, the ECMWF. Sometimes they will interchange. Maybe I'll show the Euro and not the GFS, but you know, there's a GFS, there's the Euro, there's the Canadian, there's the JMA. You know, there's so many. I'm going to focus on mainly the two global models that I'm the most familiar with and that are the easiest for me to display for you, etc. And it helps also with time. We don't have a lot of time. People don't want to necessarily watch a 30-minute video. And if we go over all of the model possibilities, not only is it too lengthy, but it just muddies the water. And the GFS and the European, basically the two of them are generally the best overall. And we'll look at what those show on a global model scale. When we have an intense hurricane headed for land at some point, we'll look at some of the hurricane models like the HWRF and others, but we'll get to that. All right, so for now, let's start with a wide shot here of most of the Western Hemisphere, and this encompasses all of our areas. Here's Gonzalo over here, 7th named storm. This eventually looks like it's going to become probably a tropical depression, maybe a tropical storm, but I don't know. I still have my doubts. And this is the first Pacific hurricane, Eastern Pacific hurricane. This is Douglas, and this is probably going to have impacts for Hawaii. And we'll take a look at all of that closer in just a moment. A vorticity check real quick. There's 91L in the Gulf of Mexico becoming more bundled. That's what I'm talking about. When I mention this, that's what we look for. And so it's trying to bundle the energy there over the very warm waters of the Gulf. Here is Gonzalo down here, a much smaller area of energy, and then a lot more energy coming off of Africa. Here it is, only July 22nd. I do believe that this is going to become a hurricane, so we're going to have our first hurricane before August 1st, which is not that unusual. 7th named storm, Gonzalo is the earliest on record. Yes, I know that the ACE index is low, but we're going to catch up very quickly. And as we have been talking about, the seeds are planted for a very, very busy hurricane season ahead, and we're starting to see that unfold right now. So real quick, looking at Douglas in the Eastern Pacific, this has implications for direct impacts to Hawaii, and even though the Atlantic Basin is where a lot of attention is going to be focused, don't forget that Hawaii is part of the 50 states of the United States, okay? And even if it wasn't, and people lived there, you know, there are islands around the world that, as far as we know, don't have people living on them. But Hawaii does, the series of island chains out here. And I'm not worried about this being a big wind impact, but you will see an increase in surf and an increase in moisture. And it won't be long, the next couple of days, that we should see tropical storm watch posted for the Big Island and eventually for some of these other islands over here, Oahu and beyond. So keep an eye on this. I'll be talking about it more. It's still several days away, but a direct impact, mainly a flood threat with some increased surf. That's what I'm thinking will happen for Hawaii. Very difficult to get a hurricane to come in from the east. Usually they come in and then they turn across, like we saw out here in the far western parts of the chain with Hurricane Iniki back in 1992. All right, so in the Atlantic, we have Gonzalo. It is continuing to strengthen, expected to become a hurricane by Thursday. It might do it before the day is out today. Who knows? This is what the track map looks like. It is officially forecast to become a hurricane, the first one of the season in the Atlantic, moving across probably the Windward Islands and into the Caribbean Sea. Typically, these smaller systems die away right through here. It's just the way it is. There's a lot of reasons behind that. I'm not going to get into that just yet. We'll tackle that, a couple days from now maybe, and focus specifically on the future. But right now, My main concern is for our friends down here in the Windward Islands, Trinidad, Tobago, Barbados, St. Lucia, etc. We'll take a close look at that and what may happen in just a moment. Also, of course, we have Invest 91L here in the, I think it's 91L, or maybe it's whatever. Let's just see real quick. Let's put this to rest. I think it's 91L, but I like to be accurate. So we'll go to the Cyclone real-time guidance page here from NCAR, and yes, it's 91L. All right, so yeah, 91L in the Gulf of Mexico. 50% chance. Recon maybe later today, we'll see, as we looked at on the satellite imagery here. This is more disheveled overall, kind of blobs of thunderstorms instead of banding. And that's a really, really important distinction here, because when we're looking at blobs of thunderstorms instead of them banding, like we see with Gonzalo, this is less organized. Okay, so these are just clusters of storms. There is vorticity and some spin down here, like I showed you on the vorticity graphic here, but it's not concentrating and creating the banding that we're seeing like here. This is Gonzalo. And you can see Gonzalo, very small, but it's got the bands with it. Definitely some banding going on. Much more organized system, a very small area of intense convection. In fact, that last frame right there, look at that last frame, and let me stop it when it gets to it so I can show you this. Boom. This is from the weathernerds.org site, by the way. Look at that hot tower, as we call it, right there. A large thunderstorm complex that's gone up very high into the atmosphere. You can see the shadow around it, and that is indicative of a lot of upward motion, and that lowers the air pressure, and that's real close to the center of circulation. There is dry air right up here, and that is trying to get pulled in, maybe even a little bit of shear where the wind is in the atmosphere is kind of blowing that dry air into the system, kind of like a hair dryer on a steamed up bathroom mirror. If you just leave the mirror alone, it takes a long time usually for it to dry out. If you take a nice hot shower and the mirror gets steamed up, but if you get a hair dryer on it, it goes a lot faster, the clearing. And that's what happens if you get shear that comes in. Strong wind can, in the atmosphere at different layers, can inject dry air. So far, that's not happening too much, and Gonzalo is off to the races. A small tropical cyclone, small tropical storm in its size, but it is forecast to become a hurricane over very warm water through this area right here, warmer than average by maybe a degree Celsius is what it looks like to me, certainly close to it. And even warmer water back to the east. Just an incredible setup, unfortunately, for those of us that do not want to have to deal with hurricanes. I mean, they are an interesting and inherently exciting phenomenon in nature. There's no doubt about that. But they come with some very dangerous impacts, especially if you are unprepared or don't use common sense. So this very warm water is going to play a factor here, because we could see a period of rapid intensification of Gonzalo, and it won't surprise me if it reaches 90 to 100 miles per hour at some point. That's not a forecast, that's just saying that's not going to surprise me. And I know you say, well, that's an easy thing to say. You're not willing to forecast it. Let me explain. These small systems have the ability to really ramp up fast if the conditions are right. And they only need those conditions to be right in a small area because they are a small system. You understand? They're not this giant sprawling hurricane. Even Dorian was a fairly small hurricane, but it was larger in its size than Gonzalo. Katrina was a big hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico. Rita, you think of others like Irma. They needed a much larger area in the Atlantic of favorable conditions, meaning warm sea surface temperatures, abundant moisture in certain layers of the atmosphere, no dry air intrusions, and light winds in the atmosphere so that the convection can go up and then spread out. And we can see that very easily here in the satellite animation, that air going up and spreading out. Look at that right there, how it kind of fans out, that little pinwheeling look. That's that clockwise flow in the upper levels of the atmosphere, whereas in the lower levels, it's counterclockwise, the air feeding into that core. Amazing. And it's going on to strengthen. And like I said, it's not going to surprise me at all if we see it peak out at 90 to 100 miles per hour. Don't be shocked if that happens. So I want to focus on the evolution here. This is 91L and this is Gonzalo, okay? So let's just look at this. This is the wide shot of the Atlantic Basin. Here are the islands of the Caribbean. This is the west coast of Africa, the Gulf Coast states over here. You get that? All right. So let's put this into frame by frame here. Close that Google ad there real quick. It just helps to keep me less distracted. 12 hours, 24. There we go. 24 hours out. Our system in the Gulf trying to sharpen up, but there's the signature, just a very sharp trough. But look at Gonzalo there. I don't know how to explain these height lines without it getting into a long discussion. All these little lines you see here, these are the heights of the atmosphere. But the way this just darkens in there, it's like a black ball. That shows me that the global model here, which is not the resolution of the hurricane models like the HWRF, the former GFDL, which is now the HMON, the global model, quote, seeing that black ball, so to speak, that's incredible. So this is going to be a hurricane, in my opinion. That's what the model is indicating. We go on out to 48 hours. A couple things to note. This doesn't get too much more organized as it approaches Texas, but onshore flow, heavy rain, some storm surge. Yes, just blowing the wind across the water towards land is storm surge. Whether it's 6 inches or 6 feet, it's still onshore flow. There will, and if you live up here on the Northwest Gulf, you know how sensitive your area is to onshore flow. So keep that in mind. Now, let's zoom in and take a look. And this is just marvelous what Levi has done with the different regions that you can zoom into. Here's our system in the Northwest Gulf. This is Friday morning, trying to bundle up. It's going to have some thunderstorms with it, some very heavy rain, probably some flooding issues in the typical areas, Meyerland maybe. It just depends, and I'm not singling out Meyerland, but they do have a lot of flooding problems. They're usually from Brays Bayou. So we'll focus on those impacts soon. We're still a couple days away, but this is concerning. There's Gonzalo right there, very well defined in the modeling, for sure. Very well defined, embedded in the easterly flow here. You can see that very easily with these wind flags moving right along in the trades there. So that's 48 hours going out to 72. And that's Barbados right there underneath my pointer at around 13 and 59, roughly. Almost 60 degrees longitude. And that's, again, a very well-defined signature in the model. And then at least on this run of the GFS, it goes right over Barbados and into and across the Windward Islands there. Maybe a little bit of a less organization from where it is there, possibly on a weakening phase. Hopefully, we'll see. And then at 96 hours, it's in the Eastern Caribbean. And by day 5, it starts to die out. And there's a lot of reasons for that we will go into later. Probably I'll deal with this more tomorrow. So you folks down here in the windwards definitely want to pay attention to this. Does not look like too much of a threat directly to Trinidad and Tobago there, but certainly the islands farther to the north. And if we look at the geography of the area right now, Barbados certainly, maybe Grenada and St. Vincent, the Grenadines, St. Lucia, maybe Martinique. But I would have my hurricane plan ready, something like that. Very possible. The global model, they're seeing this, and this is not that far out in time that we're talking about a potential landfall at, roughly 72 hours from now. Okay, so that's not that far out. That's not 5 days. That's not 10 days. So you guys be ready there in the Windward Islands. I know a lot of people watch these videos down in that region. Let me know as things progress how things are going, and I'll keep you up to date as best I can as well. All right, so again, this is the first of 2 updates. The next one will be later this afternoon, probably around 2:30, 3 o'clock. I'll put this together. I always put these videos first on Patreon. Patreon has an app, and they are the folks that crowdfund what we do. That's how I get my paycheck. And then it takes about 15 to 20 minutes to give people time there to get that first access. So I would say about 3:15 p.m. the second update will be out, available publicly on YouTube. And by the way, I'll always make these unmonetized for about the first 6 hours. Again, part of the Patreon support. No commercials, no ads, usually for the first 6 hours that I put these out. And then, I monetize them to, again, be able to earn a living to do this. And y'all's support helps to do that. So anyway, the first of 2 updates. I'm on Twitter at HurricaneTrack, and if you're watching on YouTube, you already know. HurricaneTrack, that's the brand. Hey, thanks for tuning in. I do appreciate it as always. Very busy times coming up. I'll be on top of it and lead you, hopefully, in the right direction for learning what we can about what's happening with the latest information, etc. Again, this afternoon we'll go over what the Euro shows when that information comes out. I am Mark Sudduth for HurricaneTrack.com. I'll talk to you again in a few hours.